of Robert Lee, Ulysses S. Grant, and Frederick Douglass. Robert E. Lee. The famous officer who reached up to Confederate general command during the Civil War was feared by many in the North and respected by many troops in the South, retired and returned to his home in Arlington. Unfortunately for him, Robert E. Lee lost his citizenship as well as his property, which was turned into Arlington Cemetery. Lee and his family went to Richmond, where they reside in Stuart Lee House from April to June. He was offered a position at Washington College to be their president, and he took the offer after his family convinced him to take the job. He contributed a lot to Washington College. The university, which was in debt, grew financially and physically during Lee's work there. He had the extra courses students could take, which were law, science, engineering, and journalism. He attracted funding from the North and South. The amount of faculty expanded from 4 to 20, and the enrollment of students increased from 50 to 400 while he was working at Washington. He was highly devoted and involved with Washington College and the students. He considered it a duty to talk to each of the young adults at the university. He was considered surprisingly kind for a former military officer. He inspired the students to be the new generations of Americans who opposed sectional tension and found having a unified country important. On Christmas 1868, Lee was given back his citizenship by President Andrew Johnson. He would continue his work as president of the Washington College until he died on October 12, 1970 from a stroke. He was buried under the chapel, which was constructed on college ground, which was his and his family home in Lexington, and a place he held his office. Shortly after his death, Washington College was renamed Washington and Lee University. Ulysses S. Grant. After the war ended, the Civil War. After the end of the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant was a war hero. He continued being a general after Lincoln's death and under the presidency of Johnson, and was later temporary Secretary of War. He was nominated to run office after Andrew Johnson's impeachment and became the 18th President of the United States on March 1869. At age 46, he was the youngest president and was politically inexperienced. To help African Americans in the South from whites who tried to harm, dominate, and intimidate them, Grant enforced the Ku Klux Klan and Enforcement Act. The act suspended habeas corpus in some South Carolina counties and allowed troops into the South to suppress the Ku Klux Klan. He pushed the ratification of the 15th Amendment and ratified it on February 3, 1870. Ulysses S. Grant also established national parks, and was actually the first to establish national parks in the country, which was Yellowstone. He changed relationship policies and regulations with the Native Americans, and tried to help protect them from those who want their property. He also tried to bring free public education without discrimination of gender, ethnicity, and spiritual beliefs. He did have an interest to start a civil service commission, but wasn't used until President Garfield was assassinated. Despite those actions and being an honest man with good intentions, he had some corrupt government officers. There was a financial scheme by Gray Gould and James Fisk, which Grant wrecked their plans by having the Secretary of Treasury sell enough gold to foil it, but not before the problems wrought on businesses. He easily won the re-election of 1872, but there were even more heinous scandals, such as the whiskey rig, uncovered by Secretary of Treasury Benjamin Helms Pistol, who found the scandal was helped by high-ranked government officials in defrauding tax revenues. The scandal had evidence of Orville E. Babcock, one of Grant's private secretary, being involved. William Babcock, Secretary of War, accepted bribes and was impeached, therefore escaped conviction. Grant left office in 1876. Grant began his travels around the world on May 1877. Due to his reputation of saving the Union of the United States of America, he was greeted as a hero and met with international leaders and government. Republicans nominated him to run a third term, but James A. Garfield won the election of 1880. In 1881, he began living in New York City, partnered with a firm owned by Ferdinand Warren and his son Ulysses Jr. He encouraged others to be involved in the firm. War swindled them, and the firm collapsed in 1884, empowering Grant's family and tarnished his reputation. To support his family, he began writing short magazines. He then started making an autobiographical memoir and partnered with Mark Twain, famed novelist and one of Grant's friends, to publish the literary work. In June 1885, Grant's family moved to Mount McGregor, New York, in Adrenaline Mountain, where they resided in a cottage, where Grant eventually died on July 23, 1885, from throat cancer he found he was suffering about the same year he was bankrupt. He managed to finish the 2-volume book several days before he died, and his friend Mark Twain published the work shortly after his death. Grant was temporarily kept in a vault at Riverside Park before having his remains moved to a geographical granite tomb in Manhattan. His tomb was known as General Grant National Memorial, which was where his wife's coffin was placed beside his after she died on December 2, 1904. Engraved in his tomb is "Let us have peace," a slogan he had during his campaign for president. Lee and Grant never wanted the Union to split, nor have a nation go to war with each other. Years of sectional tensions grew to a point that the United States has a war with each other, the bloodiest war in the country's history, even more than other wars that America fought combined. The war caused families and friends to separate and fight each other, and caused many friends and family members to die. The war caused a lot of damage and a lot of loss over the conflict, for or against the unity of the U.S. And since the nation reunited, Lee and Grant may try to do what they can to unify the people, discourage sectional tension, and prevent other tragic or conflict like the Civil War, and strengthen the nation. Frederick Douglass, the most prominent and influential African-American abolitionist, continuous movement for civil rights for all. In 1872, Douglass became the first African-American to be on ballot, even though he was nominated for vice president without his knowledge or consent. In June 1874, Douglass became the president of the Freedmen's Savings Company, which was created to assist former slaves to transition from freedom to freedom and allow ex-slaves to learn financial responsibilities. He tried to save the bank from shutting down by donating $10,000. Unfortunately, within a few months, Douglass being president of the Freedmen's Savings and Trust, it was shut down by the government, not knowing that the funds were not insured. He was the ambassador of Haiti, but resigned after 2 years because of government policy he did agree on. Douglass was a minister and counselor and a consul general from 1889 to 1891. He moved to Washington, D.C. and became an editor of the New National Era. When his wife Helen died in 1882, he married Helen Pitts, a white feminist and daughter of Gideon Pitts, who was also an abolitionist. He and Anna had a lot in common, of principles in common, and remained married for 11 years, until his death on February 20, 1895. He died from a stroke or heart attack after attending the National Woman and Council at the nation's capital,